How you going, everybody? Welcome to the, well, I guess official. I was going to call it the unofficial, but it is very much the official kickoff of the Brekkie NFL show, aka the NFL Brekkie show. We've been doing this now for 4 years, Laws. Figured we'd get that sorted. But welcome to the season. It's good to rejoin you as we now are in the twilight of the northern summer, the twilight of the southern winter. And all that means is that NFL kickoff is imminent, man. It's good to be back with you.
The buzz that comes with the start of a new season, Phil. I mean, I know you and me have been studying. It's been a hectic, I wouldn't call it an NFL off season. I wouldn't even call it an NFL down season. I think from the world of sport that we've had going on, both home and abroad, we're fresh off a FIFA Women's World Cup on Australian shores. We've got a FIBA World Cup going on right now. Of course, you can catch that all on ESPN, the EE app. And then all of a sudden, here comes NFL, like the preseason matchups, training camp buzz, hype. We're going to touch on that. And we're less than, 2 weeks away from this thing kicking off with the Lions making a big visit to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the anticipation is building. But something I noticed in my conversations just with friends, people around the office, group chats, which are all firing up. It's fantasy draft season, so your group chats are on an absolute heater right now. If you haven't gone into the velodrome that is draft day just yet, is it just the fire in my voice is starting to come out a little bit. And I know it's not often very far away from the surface, but I'm feeling prone to fire up. I've been told that people can sense the energy behind my takes is building, and that just means that we're getting towards September here, and it's go time.
Yeah, man, I can tell you that from the hours of the direct messages I get from you on Twitter. You are gearing up for that week 1, Monday, 3 a.m. kickoff time, which, we're 2 weeks from right now, it's going to be almost kickoff of Bills Jets, which is going to cap week 1. We're going to do a few versions of this show between now and then. Today is our first of 2 preseason previews, just talking about the teams. And then we have something exciting coming up later this week, a fantasy preview. I'll allow you to break the news on that later on. My eyesight's terrible, so I'm going to lean in for this. Cue the welcome back Cotter music. Nice to see your beautiful faces again. Thank you, Brad Bolt. Nice to see you contributing to the show again. And Brad, that actually segues and dovetails beautifully. This is the People's Show. So Laz and I are going to talk about, as we do, some NFL preview content. In a way that's, I feel like it's a little more casual. We don't rank stuff. We give things nicknames. We have cheeky comparisons. That's our brand. And because these are the conversations that you and I, Laz, have had now for 5 or 6 years. It's what caused us to launch this show 4 years ago. We thought there might be potential. We have a lot of people who have been contributing and regular contributors, listeners, viewers of the show. We thank you for that. I'm exceedingly grateful for that. So as we kick this off, man, if you have opinion, if you agree with us, disagree, dissent, confer, whatever, please weigh in. This is the People's Show, but it is a family program, so keep it PG-13-ish or less. But Laz, first topic we're getting to, and it's the season of optimism. Everybody's undefeated. All 32 teams have a measure of hope. Yeah, ceilings and floors may differ. But as we sit here now, it's the league built on parity. I believe as we stand, only 2 teams have shorter than 10-1 odds to win the Super Bowl at the end of the year. So it's really dramatic in this league, especially how wide open it is. So we're going to step out and lead out with contingencies with a segment that we call I Like Big Butts. And this is if, ands, or buts. Contingencies that will determine how these teams fare. So hypothetical situations, if this happens, then this will happen, or this will happen, but. So Laz, I've been talking a little too much, man. Do you want to do the honors and give us our first if, and, or, but?
Yeah, I love that we've divided this show up into a couple of juicy segments here, and this is your one off the top. Reminder, this is a family show. That is Big Butts with 1 T. I'm going to start
today, just in case. We wanted to push the envelope of that PG-13. So I'm fresh off the squat rack, just in case somebody wants to add that second T.
Yeah, I'm stunned that you've been. We are episode 1, season 4. We're in the first 5-10 minutes.
Under 5 minutes.
Phil's first gym drop has landed. All right, to the surprise of precisely no one. What was what was the take? Talking about $1.10, what was the take that I hammered as one of my big victories last season? Trevor Lawrence was going to finish the season as a top 6 quarterback in the NFL. So where else to start the 2023 season of the NFL Brekkie Show than the Jacksonville Jaguars will finish the season as a top 3, 1, 2, 3, top 3 offense. We'll go with by DVOA. That seems to be a wide metric across the NFL literati and fans alike. Top 3 offense in DVOA if, we're starting with if that offensive line stays healthy. That's a big if. Last season, they were 9th overall in DVOA, 6th in passing with Trevor Lawrence there, working with what had been the much maligned contract of Christian Kirk, certainly aged pretty nicely, and 20th in rushing. Now, the rushing gets a big boost in terms of talent in the backfield there. We know what they have in Travis Etienne, but now you get Tank Bigsby. There's the tank. Yeah, now we get Tank Bigsby, who I loved coming out of the draft. We talked about him. Go back, watch the draft shows. We're big fans of Tank Bigsby. Would have liked to see him land in a starting role and get that opportunity, but I have no doubt that some of the reports through preseason, we talk about hype, we talk about buzz, he's going to get a bigger look as his season goes along. He adds a different, perhaps more power. He's got some smoothness to him, but he certainly does have a bit more of a power element than you might expect with Etienne. So you're adding that, but as I mentioned, they were 6th in DVOA and as a passing offense last year. And what did they add? Agent Zero, Calvin Ridley now, a Jacksonville Jaguar. We were excited about this trade when it happened as a future investment. You want to talk about hype. There's a list of receivers often dominate so much of the hype train in preseason camp because you see them in one-on-one battles against corners, one-on-one drills, which are so slanted against cornerbacks. It's so tough when you've got a wide receiver with the entire field to work with. But Ridley's been burning up DBs the entire preseason. He looks sharp. He looks quick. He looks ready to take the mantle as number 1 receiver there. Christian Kirk will fall back more into a traditional number 2, or if he's working out of the slot, he might not even be on the field for some 2 wide receiver sets. You've got Zay Jones there. Evan Ingram really came along. They invested in him, gave him the extension in the offseason, so you can see his confidence, the level he's taken his game, that's gone to another level. Yes, the offensive line had some changes there. So change out at tackle with Jawan Taylor out. They invest early in the draft there. There's some faith in Walker Little to take up one of those starting jobs as well. So if if the offensive line maintains itself, Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, and co. on track for top 3 offense by DVOA in 2023.
Laz, this segment has already satisfied what I hoped it would. As soon as you said Jacksonville top 3 offense, I had this internal trigger that said, man, what about that offensive line? Football is back. Yes, it is. Laz, I thought, what about that offensive line? A little bit thin. We're worried about the left side of it. And then you said, yeah, if they stay fit and they improve a little bit, they progress as the season goes. I mean, the Colts might have the worst secondary in the NFL. Houston's defense is not far ahead of it, and then even within the division, Tennessee is going to really struggle. I think their offensive line is a shambles. Ooh. So yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, we're going to be talking about Jacksonville a lot because they are the best team and perhaps the second worst division in the NFL. I'm on board, man. I'm on board with your if that offensive line stays together. Trevor Lawrence, you have been driving that bandwagon. You are a platinum member of the T-Law Hair Club for Men. Yeah, I'm with you. Top 3 offense, DVOA, we'll take it. Mark it down. Laz, we're going to go green on this show. I'm going to stay in the sunshine state of Florida, talking about another Florida man. My if, the Dolphins will win the AFC East if Tua Tagovailoa is the starting quarterback in Week 15 and beyond. This Dolphins team has perhaps the NFL's best defense. They're top 3, top 5. They're one of the few teams that could stake a claim to being a better defense than the team in their division, the Buffalo Bills, who are loaded with talent, perennial contender, who have fallen short. Now they're really feeling the weight of Josh Allen's contract, are the Bills. Listen, the AFC East is going to be a lot of cannibalism at the top. Jets, Dolphins, Bills, all 9, 10, 11 wins. Margins are going to be small. So I start looking at things like strength of schedule. I'm going to read you the Bills' stretch run. This is weeks, the last 6 games, so weeks 12 and beyond. At Philly, at Kansas City, home to Dallas, at the Chargers, home to New England, where I saw them lose on Monday Night Football 2 years ago, at Miami. They also have at Cincinnati in the first half. That is an absolute gauntlet for the Bills. Now, again, a lot of that is the internal turmoil that Miami has to fare as well, but Miami goes to Buffalo early in the season when it's warm. Late in the season, they host the Bills. The reason this is such a big if, though, is the sad fact that Tua Tagovailoa, we've seen routine tackles on him now lead to concussions or concussive episodes. And that is a condition that can be chronic. And you consider the fact that every time he goes down, especially if he goes down and his head hits a turf, there's going to be increased scrutiny on him because of the reputation and how the Miami medical staff and some of the reviewers of those games failed him last year. So I have steep concerns about my if Tua is going to be the starting QB in week 15 and beyond. But if you told me today he's starting week 15, 16, 17, especially that late season game at Buffalo, they have my vote to win the AFC East.
Another team that could use some stability and health on the offensive line there, particularly when you look at someone like Teron Armstead. But look, I think I threw it up before. John Roberts saying, yeah, Phil, love it. He's loving the Dolphins praise that we got going on here. A little spoiler here. Might not be the last time we heap some praise on some Dolphins players in today's show. And that's not just a shout out for ESPN Australia, New Zealand editorial chief, Stu Randall, to be tuning in. I know he already is, with his beloved Dolphins possibly getting some shine. Just a little teaser.
One of our producers is a big Dolphin supporter. There's a lot of groundswell of partisan Dolphin support behind the scenes. So if you see little graphics or stories, throw a red flag, because we might just be biased against your team. You're going to accuse us of us anyway. I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of Dolphins voices on our staff.
All right, let's get to my end. And you mentioned, Phil, the AFC East there, and that's where I'm going to start my end. Dalton Kincaid, rookie tight end for the Buffalo Bills, will finish top 8 in receiving yards for tight ends in 2023. And so will Luke Musgrave from the Green Bay Packers. Rookie tight ends traditionally have a slow burn getting into the NFL. It's not usually an offensive explosion for this position because it is a dual role. You have such variety of assignments, not to mention learning route trees, being ready for NFL speed, quarterback delivery, turning around fresh out of breaks and this ball ready to be caught right in front of you, the grill of your helmet. But the talent on show from Kincaid and Musgrave, who are my tight end 1 and tight end 2 in the NFL draft. Let's start with Dalton Kincaid. We've seen it in the preseason games. Look, it is preseason. You're looking at vanilla schematic, assignments and exposés from both the offense and defense. Not everybody showing their full repertoire there, but you see his matchup abilities lined up in the slot. We're hearing phrases like, 1.5 tight ends on the field or 11.5 personnel, they're calling it. Not a true 12 personnel with Dalton Kincaid because he's not that inline type of blocker, down and dirty, George Kittle style, Iowa tight end style. But he is someone that can, you can use him in different ways. Think about how some of the Rams schemes have used, wide receivers as blockers at the second level. You're going to see some of the assignments that are put towards Dalton Kincaid. That's where he's seen. But from the receiving standpoint, you see the nuance, you see the catch radius, you see the quality of hands, you see how quickly he becomes a north-south runner and a threat after the catch once the ball is secured. And just from a dispersion of targets and where this thing is going from Josh Allen's arm, an offense we expect to throw the ball plenty. He is going to be their second best receiver. The Gabe Davis, you can look, whether you're a fantasy fan, a Bills fan, whatever, you can hang around and wait for the Gabe Davis breakout to happen. I think you'll be waiting for quite some time. I think last year was pretty telling with that. Dalton Kincaid's going to be your number 2 receiver, your second best receiver, and I think your second most fed receiver in that offense behind Stephon Diggs. You're telling me he's to get into the top 5 at receiving last year for tight ends, you basically needed to clear 800 yards. If you don't think Dalton Kincaid can walk out there and get 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, working as a full-time, basically wide receiver 2 in that offense, but nothing coming to you. Now we kick over to Luke Musgrave. This is more of the one where I'm putting it out there. This is more of the risk. But I think Luke Musgrave, look, the drumbeat throughout training camp, that young Packers, not just the skill positions, not just the receiving core, but obviously the quarterback as well, behind a really good offensive line that is deep and diverse in how they can, they have the ability for players to switch sides, go from outside to inside. You're not looking at someone who is going to be needed constantly to provide extra chip help and blocking help for an offensive line that is strong. So whilst he can handle those responsibilities, you see what he does after the catch. You see the smooth athlete, the explosive athlete that he is. Health was his biggest question coming out so far. It's been green light for Luke Musgrave. He's looked fantastic in preseason, the training camp clips as well. This just continues a steady drumbeat that this guy can be a star and establish himself as one of the most fed and supplied with targets on that Green Bay Packers team. where, because it is so young, Christian Watson had his breakout moments last season, but it's not like he was someone hogging 15 targets a game. He's an explosive receiver more than a down and down out possession receiver. There is ample opportunity for Musgrave to establish himself as one of the alphas in that receiving core, tight ends and wide receivers combined. And look at the snap share, how often he was on the field with the ones throughout preseason games, how often he was running routes. He dominated that. He's their tight end one, safety blanket for a young quarterback in Jordan Love. So both those tight ends, Kincaid and Musgrave, to finish top 8 in receiving yards for tight ends in 2023.
Yeah, reflexively, when you said that, I thought Luke Musgrave was more likely to, because the thin nature of the Packers receiving core. I mean, you mentioned Christian Watson. He's the receiver 1. Romeo Doubs, who's a fine player, wide receiver 2, certainly wouldn't be that on most teams. Jaden Reed, the rookie, probably their wide receiver 3. And then you look at the strength of that offense, if there is one, it's the offensive line and the running backs they have, and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon back there. There are going to be a lot of teams, I think, packing the box and daring Jordan Love to beat them. You get that intermediate target in Luke Musgrave, you develop a rhythm there. Somebody is going to come out and be a favored target of a young quarterback in Jordan Love as he tries to develop a rhythm in a scenario with probably the highest bar of any new quarterback, just who you take over. They had 30 years of week ones with Rodgers and Favre going back 3 decades. And then, Laz, you look at who Green Bay has to replace from a skill position standpoint. Alan Lazard, Robert Tonyan, Randall Cobb. Hell, Juwan Winfrey is gone from that team. So I'll buy Musgrave. You sold me on Kincaid. I'll give you that. I was going to challenge you on that. You sold me on Kincaid. And a lot of that does come down to, as talented as the Bills are under center, and as talented as they are with their defensive front and their safety duo might be the best in the league. Man, the receiving targets after one, it starts to get pretty flat. It feels like they have a lot of 3s and 4s out there. And I mean, they even lose a few guys in the offseason that, could have stepped into that role, like a Cole Beasley or even heck, a Devin Singletary. So somebody's got to step up. And how Dalton Kincaid is built, you and I talked about this at the draft. This is a kid who was a high-level slalom skier. And when you see him run routes, how he gets his hips and makes quick cuts, it's a low bar for him to clear to get through a Khalil Shakir, all due respect, and Gabe Davis, who we just continue to remember a 4-touchdown game in the playoffs that he had. It doesn't seem like there's that clear option for a team that we know wants to throw the ball a lot, and a quarterback who's certainly capable of it. Somebody's got to arise, and he can be helped by the fact that they have a Dawson Knox inside that may be your tight end 1 in a depth chart that gets a lot of the attention of those linebackers. That could create mismatches for Kincaid. So I'm with you there.
To quote a dear friend of mine, as a former colleague and someone who's in a fantasy league that I'll be drafting against on a rooftop this Friday night, somebody's got to catch passes in Buffalo. But let's move on to Yora and Phil. I've thrown it out there. I've really put myself out on the line there, putting all this faith in a rookie position that doesn't tend to explode with production in that first year in their freshman campaigns. What you got for us on the and front?
We're going to climb the ladder. Derek Carr will throw for 4,000 yards, and the Saints will win their division, and the Saints will win a playoff game. I think Derek Carr going to New Orleans, a team that was in the most winnable division in the league last year. Now they get a true volume quarterback. They have the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL at season's onset. A diverse array of offensive weapons. Yeah, Alvin Kamara is going to be out the first 6 games, but for me, now you have a running back who you want to get a lot of touches. He comes in rested in week 7. You don't need him fit in November. You need him fit in January. And for a team that has the easiest strength of schedule, I would rather trade 6 games and however many 25 touches a game at the beginning of the season than shift that to the end. Michael Thomas, for me, is a big caveat. We saw him win Offensive Player of the Year in 2019, one of the most prolific wide receiving seasons this league has ever seen. He's played 10 games total the last 3 years. I'm not saying you can expect 16 games out of him. I know you can't. But I think Chris Olave is going to make a nice progression. You look at Chris Olave's numbers compared to Garrett Wilson last year, indiscernible, except for the fact that Olave played 5 fewer games. And everybody's very excited, deservedly so, about Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson in New York. I like Chris Olave to take the next step with a proper QB under center. This defensive backfield is elite. And I think this team, New Orleans, could win 11 games, the 11-6, perhaps even 12-5 if they catch a good rhythm and they can hit the ground running under second-year head coach Dennis Allen. That puts them not against the top wild card team, but against the second wild card team, whether that's Seattle or the Cowboys or the Giants at home. That stadium, the voodoo is real in January. David Carr, I think he stays upright, 4,000 yards. I think the Saints win a very comfortable division. The Bucs won it last year, and then who else you got? You got the Falcons and Panthers. We can talk all day about the bright future those teams have. I'm not too confident in the present. And then you put them as the third or fourth team in the NFC, a home game, January playoffs with Carr under center. I like them to win a playoff game, puts them into divisional round, which I think every Saints fan would take today.
Yeah, and I know a couple of Saints fans, and they'd be very happy hearing your prognostications, your predictions there that this is where we're going to see a resurgent Saints quarterback room. Look, not trying to bury the likes of Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. They certainly had moments. Dalton probably gets a bad rap for what his production has been at this part of his career. He's become that kind of journeyman spot starter throughout the NFL. Before we get on to we've done Fs, we've done Ms, that just leaves the big buts. But we get there. The chat is hot, Phil. People are happy that football is back, and people are very happy that the NFL Brekkie show is back. The chat is jumping. So Benny G just offers up, look at the trouble in this chat. He's not wrong. Look, the people are fired up. The people are ready. So Benny G, welcome to the party. Brad Bolt, Phil, man, I used to think you were cool, but picking the Saints over my Panthers, not sure I can vibe with that. Brad, Phil's still cool. Don't worry about it. Phil's still cool. We've got some brazen picks from the B League, says Fantasy Football. They're back in the chat. Have provided some spicy takes in season 2022. I'm going to get to that once we get to our breakout, our fantasy, our future Pro Bowlers draft, I should say. And you did touch on the Seahawks potentially being a wild card week matchup for the Saints in the NFC side of the playoffs. Well, Adam Neal, I don't know whether he's talking about that matchup or just in general, but the Seahawks to dominate. That's where he's landing on this. But let's get to the Bucs.
Lots to like with the Seahawks. Love the receiving room. I'm worried about the trenches. I'm worried about the offensive line and the defensive line and those black and blue games against the 49ers. That is an unpleasant cocktail. All
right, let's get to the Bucs. I'll start off here. And forgive me while I veer over to the AFC West and hop into a lane usually reserved for the P. Murphy vehicle. The Russell Wilson contract will not go down as an entire abject disaster in Denver after this season. But Deshaun Watson's deal in Cleveland will. I think the attention is going to veer away from whether that is look, Russell Wilson has looked certainly fitter, sharper on the scrambles and the running you've seen from him on the field. He certainly looks closer to that Seahawks prime in terms of his mobility. There's obviously still developing chemistry with the likes of Jerry Jeudy, hamstring injury, now a big question mark. Cortland Sutton, you're going to see some Marvin Mims, I believe, which I've got time for because I like Mims quite a bit there. There was a sequence from there's actually a lot to like from what Sean Payton has put out there in preseason so far. And I just have a ton of faith in Sean Payton to get that offense back on the right track. They made some big investments on the offensive line. Money doesn't always equal success on the line, but you can't fault the effort there. But there was a sequence where Russell Wilson, I believe it was against the Cardinals in the preseason game. They're moving the ball downfield. He hits Jerry Jeudy. He escapes from the pocket nicely to the right, fires to Jerry Jeudy, who Jeudy fumbles, drops that one. I'm not trying to bring up previous issues that the Broncos fans may have with Jerry Jeudy there. But the next play, we get instant pressure. Russell Wilson has to go either to a quick release or a hot. I didn't have the all 22 for that one whilst I was watching it, but he goes quick release over the middle. Jerry Jeudy, I would imagine it was his hot, or at least his one, over the middle of the field in the intermediate, whilst pressure is raining down on him. Not an area of the field that Russell Wilson has traditionally thrived in. We think of Russell Wilson's greatest moments. We think of those deep, performative rainbow long shots downfield to the likes of Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, earlier in his career, Doug Baldwin, etc. This was just a different look. It's preseason. It's the Cardinals. We've seen what the Cardinals have done with their trades and their cuts this morning. There's a great tweet from Dane Brugler saying they should bring Tank Carradine out of retirement and trade for Tank Bigsby and just make it real clear what they're trying to do in Arizona. But it's just a sequence of plays there where it just showed one, faith in a receiver, getting a receiver back on a good vibe note right after having an unfortunate drop down in a scoring position. And it's an area of the field that we haven't seen him thrive in. I have a lot of faith there. So that's the Russell Wilson side of things. Deshaun Watson side of things. You want to talk about drum beats in the offseason? I don't think you could look at the Cleveland Browns beat reporters and what we've seen up on ESPN.com with the updates to get throughout training camp and feel overly enthusiastic about the momentum that Deshaun Watson on the field has put together and that offense has put together. We know, they bring in an Elijah Moore into the fold there. We see someone like Cedric Tillman, who they're able to get a good value in the draft. And boy, that receiving room, someone like David Njoku, who did have one of the bright spots of Deshaun Watson in preseason games with a touchdown. Nice little corner ball there. But I still, in terms of the on-field action, I still saw a lot of poorly timed or short-armed throws. I didn't think it was efficient. I didn't think it was consistently crisp. Coming off what we saw from him last year, which was completely uninspiring on the field, put aside, I don't like to say that, but let's just talk about on-field, not the off-the-field stuff, which is still, his place in the league still is very uncomfortable for a lot of people and something that a lot of people still oppose. But I don't see this grand turnaround for Deshaun Watson. I don't see, he's had a full off season now from an on-field standpoint. He'll be in far better form. Look, that Cleveland Browns team is really loaded. They do have a good offensive line. The defense looks more complete. They've added investment to that super, super suspect defensive interior up front last year where they were just getting run on right up through the middle of those A-gaps over and over and over again. I think back to a game where the Chargers and Browns played against each other. Neither team could defend the run between the tackles, and that's all that either were doing. Big day for Nick Chubb and Austin Eckler there. So, yeah, I'm going with Russell Wilson. Look, I'm not going to say he's going to return to MVP status, or maybe he won't even be a top 10 quarterback by the end of the season. I'm not talking a huge resurgence there, but this won't be looked at as the disaster it has been the last few months. And it will give them at least some options for what they do going forward. They'll feel some level of comfortability if he can still be the man going forward. But I think the attention will massively turn to what on earth this deal, which is fully guaranteed for Deshaun Watson, is aging like in Cleveland. Kind of got away with, the performance on the field because it was such a small sample size after serving his suspension in 2022. I don't think there's anywhere to hide. I'm sorry to say, Cleveland Browns fans who've been through a lot, whatever your level of satisfaction or happiness or contentment or disgust is with who is currently in your quarterback room today, I don't think it's going to get particularly better over the course of the season.
Yeah, I'll start with Wilson and I'll be quick because I'm going to bring that team up later in the show. I do believe a lot of Denver's problems could be attributed to the lack of readiness to be the front man for Nathaniel Hackett. I don't think it was to the severity that Sean Payton let slip earlier in training camp and starting the war of words against the Jets. Circle that game on the calendar. What's that, week 5, week 4 coming up? Denver against the Jets. A lot of intrigue there. Robert Saleh not taking his foot off the gas either. But so I'll pivot to the Browns mostly. And Laz, you look at this team from thank you, welcome back. You look at this team from a personnel standpoint. You have to love the offensive line. You have to love the edge rushers, the corners. A lot of these positions of value, even the wide receivers. I mean, your wide receiver 1 and 2, it's solid. It's not terrible. And Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, and then DPJ as a wide receiver 3. They drafted Cedric Tillman to push him there. There's depth everywhere. It is going to come down to Deshaun Watson in a division that's going to be, I think, pretty unforgiving. I mean, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, the Ravens are an 11 to 12 to 13 win team. The Bengals should surprise nobody if they're representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. And the Steelers, there's a lot of excitement, maybe too much according to Laurie Horesh, about year 2 under Kenny Pickett. But there's a lot to like about how he progressed in the latter parts of the season. Pittsburgh is they have never been an easy out. Forget going back beyond Mike Tomlin, Bill Cowher, Chuck Noll. I mean, you go back to the 60s, they've had 3 head coaches because of that franchise stability. That team is never an easy out. The Browns, the margins are minuscule for them to avoid being at the bottom of the AFC North. And if you, in a quarterback-driven league, if you're at the bottom of your division with a record for guaranteed dollars on your quarterback, listen, it's hard not to address, it's an elephant in the room. It's always going to be with Deshaun Watson. This guy had so much positive PR in his college days and his early pro days, all that he did for Habitat for Humanity, to be somebody who's heralded as a community hero, to now to be reminded of what sounds like was a likely awful offense. Offenses plural. I mean, Judge Sue L. Robinson, you read her statements on it, said it. Habitual predatory behavior is how she described it. I was stunned given the arbiter's quotes on Deshaun Watson, what she thought of the situation and his degree of guilt in it that he was only suspended for 13 games or 11 games, whatever it was last season. It was 11 games. He debuted in week 13. It's impossible for somebody who's been the hero to now be, in a very real sense, not a sporting sense, a very real sense, a villain. That's going to affect his play. And it seems like it did. And I don't think that goes away this year. I'm with you that I think that it has and will seep into his psyche. It's compromised his ability to lead. And I do think that the Browns are going to look at that contract for a number of reasons and consider it one of the most regrettable moves in franchise history.
We're in lockstep there. Brad Bolt with a moment here, but Laurie, the Browns tweeted out a video of Watson throwing the ball 2 yards into a net. That was impressive, was it not? Yeah, that was not. In terms of the hype that is created with glossily shot, beautifully shot, slow motion videos of quarterbacks finding receivers.
The loss. I mean, like, think about it. The Chiefs, they can't go a day without tweeting a video of Patrick Mahomes doing something, eating a taco. Joe Burrow ties a bandana around his head, and the Bengals edit together a video. You would not know that the highest pick, if you look at the Browns socials, they are very quiet about, especially comparatively, Deshaun Watson's presence on that team. And he's not unaware of that.
No. On the football side of things in that division, you mentioned just how competitive it is there, 4-strong division. And people can argue about the ceiling of some of those teams, perhaps the Steelers, but not Benny G. Benny G's in here lighting up the comments. We've got not enough excitement about the Steelers. It's Pickett season, and Steelers defense will keep them in games. Pickett's accuracy will win it for them. Look, Kenny Pickett up against, again, it's preseason, there's backups out there, but Pickett hitting the likes of George Pickens and Deontay Johnson downfield with some lovely little kind of 30, 40-yard rainbows to the sidelines, doing nothing to quell the big Pickett season hype that we're seeing. All right, Phil, before we get to our next segment, you've got your last butt. You've got your big butt that you need to put out there. So go on. Lay it out there for us.
I was going to add quickly on the Steelers. Don't forget they added Allen Robinson in the offseason. So there's that just another receiving threat for Pickett.
All right. I'm going to say you can forget that they added Allen Robinson.
So as a wide receiver 3, all right. My big butt. The Lions will win their first division title in 30 years, but they will not snap their 32-year playoff win drought. The Lions, since the John F. Kennedy administration, have one playoff win. 60 years they've won one playoff game. The NFC North might be the thinnest division in the NFL. And as you survey the division, Chicago and Minnesota have horrible defenses and, frankly, horrible running back units. And weather isn't kind in some of those games, Green Bay and Chicago. Green Bay, for their part, yep, an elite running back. They got a top 10-ish defense, but no real receiving talent for Jordan Love, as we addressed. Detroit, if you forget the fact that they opened at Arrowhead, the first game for the Chiefs after winning a Super Bowl, that's a high bar. Their schedule gets very manageable for the next few weeks. They're going to rack up a lot of early season wins. They have an elite O-line. They have a very young, exciting running back room. And their defense, which underperformed greatly in the first 8 weeks of last season, they came around once Malcolm Rodriguez got on the field, once James Houston got on the field. Remember the wrecking ball he was as Aiden Hutchinson faced double teams on the second highest percentage of snaps amongst edge rushers. Only Myles Garrett was double teamed more amongst edge rushers than Aiden Hutchinson was. Fine. James Houston, the fourth, had a sack in each of his first 4 games. Only 3 guys have ever done that. He had a sack in 5 of the 7 games in which he played. I think this young defense continues to make strides. We love Kirby Joseph. We like what this team did in the draft. A lot to like about the Lions. I'm giving you the case for winning the division. But you compared them against one of the top wild card teams in the playoffs. And apples to apples, if they end up, according to my prognostications, the same position as the Saints, so they're hosting a Cowboys, a Giants, a second-place Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC East, I'm just saying, or Seattle Seahawks at home in January.
He said it. I didn't even say he said it. He did. It wasn't even me. He said about the Eagles.
How that works out for the Lions, I think that defense would be exposed in that situation. But given the schedule that's ahead of them, this is an 11-win team that is going to be quickly forgotten as they lose a playoff home game.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think, you give a little there, Phil, but you take a little bit away. The Lions, I think last season when we talked about Lions at this point, they were obviously such a super sexy, trendy pick. It was the industry's favorite for the breakout team. And you and me kind of talked about, look, success for the Lions didn't need to be, the playoffs last season, double-digit wins, a playoff win. It was just getting from that low-ranking number of wins up to that kind of 5, 6, 7 range. They surpassed expectations. And I think the next step, despite people get excited about, obviously they've had hiccups with both injury and suspension, with Jameson Williams actually getting on the field for them. But what you can, a lot of anticipation about their 2 draft picks, the two first rounders that they had, and then they spent it at interesting talents, but at positions perhaps not of the most premium variety. At linebacker and running back there with Jahmyr Gibbs, talk about a name that's getting hyped around fantasy football season. Interested to see what he goes for in my salary cap drafts this weekend. Back-to-back Friday night and then into Saturday. I need to earn some serious brownie points at this point, Phil. But it's a team that, for me, I don't think the big, deep playoff run is what is a bar for success. I think you've really bracketed, I think, not where they should be aiming for, but where Lions fans, it's never fun losing the last game of your season. Every playoff team but one will do that. But it's not a bar that you should feel that they've fallen woefully short of if that's where they end. All right, it's time to have some fun.
I think, Laz, it's a hell of a lot more fun to lose your last game in the playoffs than to what happened to them last year, where they went into Week 18, and the best thing they could have done was play spoiler. They did, but it ended up being inconsequential. And it was so frustrating that the league did that with the scheduling. But I think you're right. For the Lions fan, what's the definition of success? Win that division. You haven't done it since 1993. Barry Sanders prime. So time to get back.
Start burying some of these ghosts. That's what you need to do, Detroit Lions fans, and that's a huge one. That was the moral victory of moral victories, that final game for them against the Packers. And I will say that knowing that moral victory is a very loaded term in these parts down here, Phil, and over in England, just due to some of the the NFL off-season, but Ashes on-season drama and turmoil that ensued. Anyway, it's time to have a little bit of fun here. Look, it is fantasy draft season. Doing drafts is just fun. Drafting, picking players, it's just a fun thing to do. It's the reason why, in years past, in April, I may have been on the, doing ESPN mock draft lobby, drafts, waiting in there for it to fill up, back in perhaps my more freedom of time era of my life. But people love to draft. So that is what we are loading up now as we move on to our second segment. First segment only took over half an hour, Phil. As we get to our future Pro Bowler draft, I'm going to lay this out to you.
It would take 40 minutes, and I told you were out of your mind.
All right. Yes, was completely out of my mind, but we're having fun, and the people are having fun, and the comment section is hot.
That's
so
why
we've
I
got
said
our future
people.
Pro Bowler draft.
Did I not say the people? I said
You
people
said people.
will have to hit the over.
Yeah. It's the people show. So, future Pro Bowler draft, 6 rounds. We're just going to go pick. We're not going to snake with 2 people. That just makes no sense.
Snake. We should snake.
We're not snaking. It's just 2 people.
We're snaking.
We're not snaking. It's pick for pick. I've decided it was my idea. But because I've decided that we're not snaking, I will give you the first overall pick, which is actually that goes against my argument that we're not snaking. But yeah, you can have the first overall pick. We're doing 6 rounds. We each pick 3 defensive players, 3 offensive players, 3 and 3. You can't pick 2 wide receivers. You can't pick 2 cornerbacks. You can't pick 2 offensive tackles. And we're going to lay out the true breakout stars. Now, the rules for this, they cannot have a Pro Bowl or All-Pro nomination. There are players out there that have All-Pros but not Pro Bowls. We're not going to pull at that thread today. Phil, you are going to go first. Folks in the comment section, send in your picks. When we make our picks, let us know if you think it's a reach, if you think it's absolute value, if you think we're absolutely out of our mind. We're going to kick this thing off. We're going to get through this nice and quickly. And we're going to just see, where we're really stacking our chips this season, who we're ready to plant our flags behind. So, Phil, with the first overall pick in the future Pro Bowlers draft for 2023, the Philsbury Doughboys pick who?
I mean, Laz, the only parameters you gave, right? No Pro Bowls, no All Pros.
Correct.
Right? We're not even wasting time on the clock. With the first overall pick in whatever we're calling this segment draft, the Philsbury Doughboys select Austin Eckler, running back, LA Chargers. How this guy has not made a Pro Bowl is beyond me. He was 9th in Offensive Player of the Year voting last year. He led the NFL in scrimmage touchdowns each of the last 2 years. He's got 38 scrimmage touchdowns over 2 years, 20 and 18. He's in a contract year. He said it felt like he was punched in the face that he wasn't given a long-term extension. Now the Chargers go out and they draft another deep prospect. And this guy had 107 catches last year. Plus, if he does more of the same and the Chargers take the step I think they have to make, because again, they were up 27-0 on the Jags in the playoffs last year and lost. This guy, I mean, he'll be top 5 in offensive player of the year voting. It's a contract year. Could not be more motivated. He's proven to be valuable when he gets all these touches. Austin Eckler. That's my best of the rest for guys who have made a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro. I checked that like 7 times. I'm stunned he hasn't done it.
It's an amazing. It's almost a trivia question at this point. But yeah, Austin Eckler, look, a fantasy darling, a neutral fans darling, a champion of the little guy. We're actually out at an NFL international draft a few years back, 4 or 5 years ago now, up in the Gold Coast, and one of the standout players there was a former college athlete named Travis Haney, who was best friends and former roommates with Austin Eckler back at college. In their college days, said he was a lovely guy. Not hard to believe. Anytime you see any of his media appearances, Eckler does seem like a very affable character. So yes, let's get Austin Eckler to the Pro Bowl, please. At this point, he's been underpaid. He's been underrated somehow still. He even got off to a slow start last season and then came on like a house on fire. So yes, Austin Eckler, a deserving first overall pick. Although I will say one thing, positional value, elite positional value. We think about, defensive ends. We think about offensive tackles, quarterbacks.
1.01 in my draft.
With the second pick and the first pick for Horesh's homers, you mentioned him earlier. This is number 1 pick with absolute certainty. We're going down to New Orleans. We're going into the wide receiver room. We're kicking it open and bringing Chris Olave into the fold. Chris Olave poised for an absolutely monstrous season. Yes, Michael Thomas is back. I don't think that's a negative for Olave. I think that attracts a certain level of coverage, particularly on those slant routes inside for Michael Thomas. But yes, Chris Olave, he was top 8 in yards per route run last season. He was far less heralded than, as you mentioned earlier, Garrett Wilson. Their numbers stack up quite positive. Brad Bolt has given me the tick of approval there. Yes, Loz, great pick. Benny G says, that surprises me. Thought Eckler was a Pro Bowl already. Agree, Phil. Has to be picked this year. Has to happen. So we're getting good feedback so far. So far, our picks are not being viewed as reaches, or that we've completely lost track of where the football world is at. But Olave, look, there's so much slack here. Explosive producer. Is he going to break through contacts like, AJ Brown? No, that's not his game. But the sophistication, the quick cuts, the routes, the explosiveness, this ability to threaten down the field, every inch of the field, really, that he makes a cornerback defend. Olave is my pick. He will be a Pro Bowler. I'm very, very happy to secure him. I thought I might lose him giving you the first overall pick, but I'm happy that he's part of Horesh's homers for the 2023 future Pro Bowler draft class.
Yeah, I mean, Laz, it's he was on my list. I applaud it. Obviously, he plays significantly into my confidence in the Saints. Took them over their win total. I've taken them to win the division, and here I've taken them to even win a playoff game. With durability concerns persistent about Michael Thomas, and perhaps that ankle injury proves chronic, Olave is a wide receiver 1.5. And I'm telling you, look up his numbers last year against Garrett Wilson. Do the blind resume. You tell me who had the better season. And it's nothing against Wilson. He's terrific, and I think he'll thrive with Aaron Rodgers. I'm saying I think Olave is underrated in the grand scheme of things. Loved him at Ohio State. Actually hated him because I support Penn State. Loved him in the draft process. Love him in New Orleans. I love the pick. Laz, you said what? I went with a position of not value in 1.01. I skipped out on receiver and edge rusher and quarterback and all that.
I'm just telling you what the league is telling you when it comes to running back value, Phil. I'm holding a mirror up to the NFL market.
Run Eckler into the ground for 3 seasons. I'm going to pick up his player option for the 5th. I'm going to run him into the ground for season 4, season 5, tag him in season 6, make him hold out of camp, and then ship him off. That's what I'm going to do.
Phil Murphy, part of the problem, not the solution.
All right, my pick in round 2.01. You said I didn't go position of value in the first round. I go in position of value in the second round. Edge rusher.
Oh, no.
Defensive rookie of the year runner-up. 9.5 sacks, 3 interceptions. And I said only Myles Garrett was doubled at a higher rate, respected around the league. People are going to look at him and say, yeah, it's time. He played like the number 1 pick last year. And I think on his career CV, it's going to be like the 1 year he didn't make a Pro Bowl. And Hutchinson, guy had the highest floor in last year's draft, and he showed us why. League respects the heck out of him. And now with the Lions, you can't sleep on a James Houston on the other side. Malcolm Rodriguez is a vacuum in the middle. I like what they did with Brian Branch. A lot of teams, people don't like this secondary. I think they're a little underrated. Yeah, the rest of the linebackers after Rodriguez, Jack Campbell's going to be starting as a rookie, fine. I think what else is going on the defensive front, Aiden Hutchinson's going to get a lot more freedom. He's going to be doubled at a lesser rate. He has to be than he was last year because of how well everybody else played in the second half of the season. Give me the over on like 11.5, 12 sacks, whatever that market is for Aiden Hutchinson, and have him popping his jersey, hugging the commissioner as the newest member of the Phillsbury Doughboys.
So I heard you talking about, position of value. I start to get nervous. I heard you talking about edge rusher. I start to get nervous. And look, Hutchinson's a great pick, but that is not who I had lined up. I was tossing up whether to go Olave or this other player with my first overall pick. What did I say before? What did I tease before? Which fan base might we be pandering to in this episode? Miami Dolphins fans, come on down, because we're going edge rusher. We're going someone who has 15.5 career sacks through 2 seasons. We're going someone that has been annihilating not only Miami offensive line, but in their joint practice against other teams, he has been causing absolute havoc. That is Jaelan Phillips. Jaelan Phillips is everything you want athletically. He has nuance to his pass rush. He beats you in a variety of ways. He plays on a team that, as Phil said earlier, if Tua is healthy, is going to be able to put up a lot of points, is going to be able to put them in positions where they're leading from the front. What does that allow you to do? Get those edge rushers tearing off the edge there, threatening against quarterbacks, taking on those offensive tackles and getting them on the back foot. Jaelan Phillips, I think, is absolutely poised. He might beat that 15.5 sack tally this season, especially when you consider inside you've got someone like Christian Wilkins, who causes disruption himself. When you compare those up and rush those kind of guys together and have games together and force quarterbacks into rough spots there. I love Jaelan Phillips here. 7th last season, Phil, in 2022, 7th in ESPN's pass rush win rate. So this is a man that absolutely has put it on paper from a explosive, eye test standpoint, from a metric standpoint, from a number standpoint, to have 8.5 and 7 sacks in your first 2 seasons where sacks and look, credit to Aiden Hutchinson for the numbers he put up as well. But getting that level of sack production early on at the edge rush position does not come easy. I think Jaelan Phillips is poised to become an absolute household name. Go look, just type Jaelan Phillips into Google, hit the news tab, and just have a look at what the headlines read. And it is just, it's a who's who of publications, of course, ESPN in there. It's a who's who of publications, and the headlines are just that this man is causing absolute nightmares for offensive linemen, offensive tackles in general. So Jaelan Phillips, very happy to have him on board. We've got the top 2 players on our board have come to us at pick 2 and 4. We're feeling good. And let's have a look at look, Brad's just give it, look, yes, good pick again. Great stuff so far, guys. Should we call the season here, Phil? It's tough to get better.
Yeah, what GM doesn't say we got the top 2 guys on their board in the middle of the second round? Not a one. Every one of them says it lies. Everyone says it.
So mean.
And listen,
you just cut me down.
Credit, you could have sat on edge rusher because I already took one. I can't take another one. When you started going with that, I thought you were going Kayvon Thibodeau, to be honest, because he, for me, is another candidate. How he progressed, he had an early injury last season. He kind of climbed. Towards the end, he was an absolute terror. Ball hawking, punching the ball out, multiple forced fumbles. High on Thibodeau. Trevon Walker, maybe we thought he was going to make a stride, but you go Jaelan Phillips. Now we're out of edge rushers. Yeah. Hyatt. Oh, see, I love Jalen Hyatt. I do. I loved him at the draft.
I knew I could put this up here because one of the spoilers, we didn't tell each other our picks, but we steered away from rookies in this. So I knew that putting Hyatt and Banks up there wasn't going to be an issue. And you mentioned Kayvon Thibodeau, and we're obviously neither of us are going to take him, having already grabbed our edge rushers. But yeah, B-League certainly on the point there and certainly thinking likewise. All right, Phil, your third pick. I can see you sweating. Look, you're sweating. See, it's all easy at the top of the draft board, people. It's all easy. And now we're into the middle rounds.
There's a guy I'm not picking that I know you like, and I'm worried I'm going to lose him. But I'm going to gamble. I'm going to go, again, I'm not going position to value. I'm sorry. But if we're looking for a guy to make a stride and make a Pro Bowl, narrative, right? Last year, what the Eagles had 7 or 8 starters make the Pro Bowl. I mean, they ran out. They're just at some point like Bradbury's not making the Pro Bowl because they don't want the whole. It was the whole NFC was like the Eagles and the Cowboys. I think we're going to see a similar influx this year to what could be the best defense in the NFC in San Francisco. We already got Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. How good is he? Tunalo Hufanga. I mean, it just emerged out of nowhere. So the NFL 100, Hufanga is number 78 on that list. Number 79 is a guy by the name of Dre Greenlaw, who is going to be the 3rd round pick of the Fillsbury Doughboys. I love volume tacklers. I love middle linebackers. I mean, every time we do the draft show, I'm like, oh, Patrick Queen, or we used to have the MNF kiss of death. I would always end up like gravitating toward a middle linebacker to have a good showing. Both Pro Football Focus and NFL.com have him as a top 10 linebacker in the league. 127 tackles last year. I think he replicates that. And just from a body of work standpoint, he's going to get the nod for the Pro Bowl, which I believe is in Orlando this year. They move it all around, but he's going to be there amongst the best of the best if San Francisco is not playing a moderately more important regulation game in Vegas the next week.
All that's kept flowing through my head then when you were saying, I love volume tacklers, I love middle linebackers, and you mentioned earlier Penn State fandom. I'm like, Phil, your Big Ten's showing. You're strong to your brand no matter what. No, look, Wisconsin, it makes it. Dre Greenlaw not having one of these nods already is he was on some people's All-Pro nominations list last year, but the fact that he hasn't, like, so deserving. One of those situations, and not for the first time in San Francisco, where you've got those 2-star off-ball linebackers. You think back to Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, where one often gets overshadowed. Look, Greenlaw would be a superstar, on the season tickets, on the season preview program, face of the cover. For so many teams out there. It just so happens that he has an all-world running mate there in Fred Warner next to him. Okay, with my next pick, we could go 2 ways. I've got a high position of value that I really want to go off the top, but then you got me worried because you said that I like someone and you want to snipe me for him.
I got in your head.
You did get in my head, and you know what? I'm going to allow you to get in my head, and I'm going to make a pick. Look, he was my second defensive player. I kind of wanted to go with my second offensive player first, but I'm going to go with my second defensive player. I'm going to move tags a little bit, and I'm going to go to that Houston secondary. And I'm going to, yes, there it is. I got him. See, I said, it's episode 1, people. It's the season premiere, and I've sent Phil off screen with my takery already. This is what you've got in store for yourself on the NFL Brekkie show. There he is, Jalen Petrie. Come on down. You're part of Horesh's homers. Look, there's players that I'll talk about stats. There's players that I'll talk about metrics. There's players that I'll talk about production and projections. And then there's Jalen Petrie, where if you just have a look at the commentary that surrounds him through training camp, through preseason games, Jalen Petrie is a missile. I don't care if he weighs 182 pounds, 188 pounds, 192 pounds. It doesn't matter. He tackles beyond his size. He flies around. He's so smart. He's a fantastic communicator. He was at college. He has been nothing but that. Now he gets to play for D'Amico Ryans on the Texans, a defensive coordinator and now a head coach. Look at the way he elevated players like Jimmy Ward. Oh, his running mate on the inside of that defensive secondary now in Houston. Look at the way he elevates. He puts his players in position to succeed. Jalen Petrie, come on down. Guaranteed to be a Pro Bowler, should be an All-Pro, and will be one of the names we talk about. We talk about ifs and or buts. They're not the deepest team, the Houston Texans. How could they be with the roster kind of churning they've had to do? But if that defense maintains some semblance of health and the current first teamers that you see on the depth chart do play most of their games, they will be better by virtue of great coaching and by virtue of just this being some improved talent at some important positions. Petrie's going to be one of the names we're talking about there. You got in my head, Phil, but that's okay because I read it right. It's okay when you feel the heat in the pocket. It's okay when you think you might have been fooled pre-snap or they might have got you pre-snap if you can adapt in the moment and make the right decision. I found my hot read. I found my hot route. Now it's back to you.
I'm legitimately mad. Boz, you look at Defensive Rookie of the Year voting last year. It was Sauce Gardner. It was Tariq Woolen. It was Aiden Hutchinson. It was Kayvon Thibodeau. That's your top 4. Number 5 was Jalen Petrie. And he's considered, and that if you had like your lay fan say, hey, name all 32 NFL teams and they fell one short, the one everybody's forgetting. It is, yeah. We do. We got more, but he's playing in moderate obscurity in Houston, and he's still 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. And him and Derek Stanley Jr., there's a lot of that. Those are good pieces to start a defensive backfield. Yeah, I applaud the pick. I was going there next. I was worried about losing Greenlaw because I didn't really have any other linebackers who I really, really liked. I had one, but I already took Aiden Hutchinson. I don't want to go 2 from Detroit. So, all right, I'll be quick. I'm going to go with a leader. We need guys in the locker room who are just going to be the Jason Kelsey, the proverbial Jason Kelsey of the Fillsbury Doughboys. And this guy, who was coming out of college from the University of Iowa, was compared to one Jason Kelsey. Maybe a little bit undersized on the interior offensive line, but I'll be darned. He's tough. He's smart. He leads well. He's technically sound. Now you take a guy in addition to that who was a high school wrestler, which means he plays with good leverage, strong hands. Jim Harbaugh has said he has emerged as a leader on the Baltimore offensive line. I'm going Tyler Linderbaum. I think this guy is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler, and this is when it starts. There were 2 plays last year. One game when he went toe to toe with Cam Hayward, and Jim Harbaugh's like, I got no other option but to just let him deal with it, and he stood toe to toe. And there was a game against Devin White, very capable player, where Linderbaum tossed him around, and that was just whoa, okay. You got a team that is built, has an identity on either moving the pocket or running the ball. An anchor at the middle of the offensive line, not a position of priority, but this guy is going to emerge as one of the best centers in the league, and he's going to stay there for the rest of his career. Linderbaum.
Just a really solid, just a really impressive meat and potatoes draft pick there. That's the type of it is like drafting.
I also called John Harbaugh Jim Harbaugh because I'm an imbecile, but I was still shook from the Jalen Petrie.
No, that's not your fault. That's just the annoying fact that they went with 2 J's there. I say this, I may have 3 siblings with the first letter J, but I also have 6 siblings, so we can get into that at a different time. Okay, it's a stout pick. If I was looking at interior offensive line, that would have been the name I would have gone to. Look, so far this show, it hasn't been a very homery show. I said something nice, well, kind of backhand nice, but I said something positive about the Broncos. You hinted at perhaps a pick in the NFC East that would be nice to my team. But look, much in the same way that Andrew Gabby said Dre Greenlaw can't make it because Damone Clark. Well, the Cowboys, Damone Clark having a good season. They need someone to step up at linebacker. We'll have a look at the roster 53 there for Jabril Cox. Look, what happened with Demarvion Overshown, an absolute tragedy because that guy was coming on. The Cowboys thought they'd absolutely stolen one there with the multifaceted, multidimensional, supremely athletic and great communicator out of Texas. He had picked up the playbook so quickly. It looked like Overshown was going to have a massive immediate impact on that defense. A torn ACL. Awful to see. You hope the recovery goes well and he can make what was expected to be a huge first-year impact when he comes back for his sophomore season. But I am going to go with a homer pick. That's what that preamble was for. Here comes the homer pick. And I am going on the offensive line. I suppose I could wait here because, no, you could take another offensive lineman because he doesn't play center. I'm going with a guard with tackle flexibility. I'm going with someone who, quite simply, he moves people. He moves me, Phil, but no, he moves people. This is a very athletic, very strong, and surprisingly technically adept offensive lineman in Tyler Smith for the Dallas Cowboys, who came on a lot quicker than a lot of people thought. With all the offensive tackles that were drafted ahead of him in 2022, he was seen as the raw project, maybe more of a second-round player than a first-round player, but you're picking in the back kind of third of that first round, you are going to get towards some second round grades. But this guy came along so quickly. The mental aptitude, his willingness to work, his discipline, that all started to come out very soon after the draft pick was made by Dallas. At his press appearances and his interviews, people start to get a really good feel for what type of aptitude he was going to bring to the task of learning offensive line, learning a new position in many ways at the NFL level. Tyler Smith is one of the most talented and ascendant young offensive linemen in the league. Throw together the fact that we're talking about Pro Bowl nods here and attention with all pros. The Dallas Cowboys are a machine. That fan base is huge. They vote in massive, massive numbers. So yes, Tyler Smith, I don't have to go too deep into this one. If that line maintains its health with Tyron Smith outside, with another Tyler and Biadish at center, Zach Martin back in the fold at right tackle, and Terrence Steele healthy again on the right side. If that first line is healthy, I expect him to be a high-end top 10 offensive line. That brings attention. And if something does happen, you'd hate to see it again, but Tyron Smith has not had a healthy season in close to a decade now. If he does suffer, or if he does miss time again, Tyler will be the one you think to kick out to left tackle, getting even more exposure, publicity, and props out there, which he showed very well in his rookie season. So that's where I'm putting there. It's the first homer pick, but I think it's at this point of the draft, we're getting deeper into it. At my fourth pick to get an offensive lineman with tackle guard flexibility on the biggest, noisiest team in the NFL, I'm happy with that.
Okay, Laz, I'm going to go homer picks with my last two. Tipping the hand a little bit.
Wow.
Obviously, I can only pick one here. So my round 5 pick, I was keen on George Pickens. I'm not full on that we have, young to Rice with Pickett and Pickens. I was high on Pickens at university.
Unlike Benny G in the comments, who is very sure that that's what we have.
I mean, listen, let's not get the bar too high. The bar was low for Pickett in year 1. He cleared it significantly in the second half. Let's not expect this team to win the division just yet. Pickens, I think, has an improved season, continues to progress. The problem is you look at the rest of those AFC Pro Bowlers. Tell me who he replaces. Hill, Diggs, Adams, Chase. We can keep going. Or Higgins is there. Wilson, the AFC receiving core is so deep. So I'm like, all right, I'll go tight end. And as much as I wanted to go Irv Smith, because somebody's got to be open with the Bengals. I mean, their wide receiving core is so stacked and loaded. You think Irv Smith moving over there year 1, he's gonna flourish. But he, like my boy Michael Thomas, has had some durability concerns. So I do worry about Irv Smith if he can go the length of the season. So I'm going to go to the tight end position, and I'm going to go with somebody who is now playing under a new head coach who has proven to find athletic, mobile, great hair tight ends and get them to have career years. Greg Dulcich, in 10 games played, 411 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had injury issues as well. I believe he had a calf issue last year. If we can get up to 14, 15 games played in Sean Payton's offense, I think Dulcich, especially with the receiving injury issues that Denver has, Tim Patrick probably done for the year. KJ Hamler has ongoing concerns. Jerry Jeudy's shown durability issues. Marvin Mims is the rookie. I think Greg Dulcich gets his red zone opportunities, especially if there are fitness concerns with your offensive backfield. Denver's issues weren't so much between the 20s last year. They just got to the red zone and stalled time and time again. I think Dulcich's touchdown total is more of the 7 to 9 range. I think he's an 800-yard receiver. And now you get him knocking at that Pro Bowl door, which is very crowded in the AFC with Kelsey and Andrews. I'm not saying he's there, but I'm saying if one of those teams ends up in the Super Bowl, my boy Dulcich could sneak into a Pro Bowl spot, if not this year, then next year. I'm going to call this a keeper league and take Dulcich in the 5th round.
Whew. The homer picks are picking up. All of a sudden, we were agnostic. We were impartial football analysts for an hour, and then in the last 5 minutes, it's exploded in a parade of confetti colored both Cowboys and Broncos. All right, I'm stepping back away from the homerism there. I'm not even in the same division. I'm going over to the AFC. I'm going to go. Look, I've picked a safety. Now I'm going to the defensive backfield again. I'm going to the corner stocks here. Someone who we both enjoyed watching last year as he got more opportunities, showed productivity on the ball in some big spots. And again, positive drum beats through the offseason. I think he's in position to make plenty of splash plays. He's a physical player at the cornerback spot. Cam Taylor-Britt, come on down. I think you are an emergent young cornerback. No, he's not drafted, in the high ends like a Stingley or like a Sauce Gardner. This is someone that was not picked at that top end of the draft, but I think he showed so much of what his promise was coming out of college, increased opportunities. Now we've seen more changeover, more turnover in Lou Anarumo's defense in Cincinnati. He's going to be in position to contribute. This is a day 1 starter, week 1 starter. And I think Jalen Petrie, Cam still got Jalen Petrie on the mind just because, that lovely selection is still ringing my red. But Jalen Petrie lining up in my backfield next to Cam Taylor-Britt. This is a combination that I'm all aboard. So yes, Cam Taylor-Britt, young cornerback, Cincinnati Bengals. Come on, join Horesh's homers, and we've got a very imposing, very hard-hitting, but good coverage section in our secondary.
All right, I'm gonna go in the secondary as well for my final pick. I teased it. I was going with a homer, but not at the professional level. From the collegiate ranks, homer. I thought to go Tyson Campbell. I thought to go Kobe Bryant in Seattle. I think with the reputation that Tariq Woolen has built, it's going to raise the ability for a Kobe Bryant, Sauce Gardner's college teammate at Cincinnati, to thrive. Somebody who had great tape coming out of Cincinnati. But I'm going to go with a Penn State alumnus who, at safety, led his team in sacks last year. There were concerns about his tackling. Can definitely show some improvement there in open space, but he did have triple-digit tackles, 5 tackles for loss, led Chicago in sacks. Jaquan Brisker, in an otherwise uninspiring defense, I think is going to stand out at the safety position in the NFC. Laz, he had a concussion last year, missed 2 games because of that. For the remaining 15 games, he missed 1 snap. 1 snap. If the game started, he stayed on the field the entire time. Showed a great measure of durability, playmaking ability. They love to move him up at the line of scrimmage. They trust him to be ball hawking on the other side. Jaquan Brisker, and what I don't expect to be much of a better year in Chicago. Yes, I do think they're going to get a win after week 7. Last year, I took them under 3.5 and just rode that. I think they're getting to like 5 this year. I'm selling hard on Chicago, but I like Jaquan Brisker to continue his trajectory and be probably the lone representative as a Pro Bowl defender for the Monsters of the Midway.
And I think something similar, you and me have both honed in on a safety here, because the safety position across the NFL is not stacked with massive names. People know off the top Minkah Fitzpatrick, and they know Derwin James, and then people, do we start talking about Javon Holland now? Like, where do we go here? You know, you get a big name player land in Baltimore with so much hype with someone like Kyle Hamilton, you immediately get to the forefront of these conversations. So I think that makes a lot of sense there. Player that I got a lot of time for. So I'm on board with you there. Okay, my last pick, and I'm not trying to step on running back value here, but I did wait till my last pick to pick a running back. Now, this is the part of the show where I hope no one who I'm drafting against in fantasy is watching. So please, if you're in the Any Given Monday League or Let's Get Digital League, please, you have my permission. Don't leave the chat. We love the viewers, but just mute the volume just for a second while I talk here. But we're going to go to the running back spot. You mentioned the Monsters of the Midway. As much as I like Roschon Johnson coming out of college, Texas, 3-down capabilities, big blocking on pass down, he's got that ability, more of a power back. Khalil Herbert, look, has always had juice, has always had plays that jumped off the tape. He had a play that jumped off the tape, taking, a little dump off out wide of Justin Fields and taking it to the house in preseason already. But the underlying numbers of Khalil Herbert, who, whilst he's not massive, is still like 5'9", 212 pounds. This is not 5'8". This is not 5'8", 185 pounds. This isn't 5'5", 179 pounds. Juice Vaughn, where you at? Lots of love for Juice Vaughn. This is someone who has the ability to run in between the tackles, as well as obviously hit those explosive home runs outside. But the metrics underneath for Khalil Herbert: 3rd in rushing percentage, or percentage of rushes that went for 10-plus yards last season. 7th in yards after contact per attempt. So that does show you not just the wiggle, but there is power and contact balance the way he plays. 1st in what Next Gen Stats calls rushing efficiency, which is how quickly you get north and south, how efficient you are gaining yardage. And then the massive one. Metric. The anti-Zeke. Talking about anti-Zeke metric. First in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. Now, he's never had more than 129 carries or touches in a season when you throw in receiving and rushing. But he's in place to get over that 200 touch mark. I think massively return value in your fantasy drafts. Again, I hope people from my leagues aren't watching right now. But Khalil Herbert, again, I know Roschon Johnson is there. I think Roschon Johnson will have a role here, but I think Herbert is in place to get a huge chunk of the early down work, as well as showing his ability as a pass catcher and explosive playmaker there. So Khalil Herbert, welcome to Horesh's homers for my last pick. I think you are prone. Look, whether you've had massive workload through your NFL career, I mean, the NFL market has shown us what they think of that. This is not someone he's got plenty of tread left on the tires. He's not been massively used behind the likes of David Montgomery. So yes, that is where I'm planting my flag. Khalil Herbert will come on down. I think you could burst through. And one thing we know, right, when it comes to Pro Bowls, Phil, is that you do get teams that make late runs into the playoffs. Players drop out, as players drop out and they look for next selections, sometimes they won't give the Pro Bowl nod to a player that is playing, in the Super Bowl or is in that deep run, has had that extra game. As you mentioned with your expectation for the Bears, it shouldn't be a problem for the Bears. I think they'll be improved. I think the offense has a chance to be so much fun. Again, if the line holds up. But I don't think it'll be a huge problem that Khalil Herbert won't be able to pick up the Pro Bowl run or step in duty because the Bears will be busy preparing for a Super Bowl dance in Las Vegas.
So neither of us took a quarterback. Justin Fields was out there. We both passed. Neither of us took Breece Hall. That was a little bit of a surprise. That's why I went running back first.
We did get a write-in nomination for Breece Hall from Wade Kelly, who
said running back room for the Jets. Israel,
that's the problem.
Pitt, Zonovan Knight, Dalvin Cook now, Michael Carter. I mean, they're 5 deep at the running back position.
Yes, they got some roster decisions that we're seeing flow in there that you think will thin that out. But so no quarterback, but look, you and me both showing running backs showing some of the positions of lesser value, some love.
No Trey Smith, no Isaac Seumalo. I know we got a Pittsburgh supporter in the chat.
All right, Phil. So we've drafted. How do you look? You look at your team. We've gone. Okay, it's an hour 10 minutes, so we do really need to get to our quick. It's a short last segment.
Specialty. So we, I knew when you said 40 minutes that it was double that.
But whilst prop bets, and not today, but we'll get to that in the future, they've been your specialty. Drafts, mono and mono, you and me has been my specialty. We'll keep tabs on this. I think we'll do 1 point for a Pro Bowl. Like you get 1 point if your guy makes a Pro Bowl and an extra point, obviously, if you make the All-Pro, or should the All-Pro be worth 2? What do you think? Live on the spot.
I think 1 and 1.
We'll just do 1 and 1. Clean. Okay. All right. Now, to finish this thing up, we've drafted. We've shown our big butts, ifs and ands as well. But now, Phil, it's time to slay some hype beasts. Hype picks up this time of year, the last couple of months, like crazy. It catches fire, and sometimes it's unable to be stopped. But we are not on board with every single one of these hype trains. So, Phil, as we close out the show, as we put a full stop on the season return, the season premiere, the NFL Brekkie show, what is the hype beast that you want to slay? What is the hype train that not only do you want to get off of, that you never even dared stepping on that platform?
Laz, I struggled with this because, so many of the big storylines out there, I think the Jets are going to be vastly improved. It's hard because we have a lot of good NFL minds at ESPN, and that's my closest exposure to what a hype beast is. But my most intimate exposure in an NFL sense is to my beloved Denver Broncos, who a lot of people have put a lot of confidence in the Peyton Sheriff 2.0, not the Sheriff Peyton Manning, but the Sheriff Sean Payton, to turn things around. And having watched that team, the problems were certainly at the quarterback position, and I do think Sean Payton will improve those, but they were pretty effusive. And now we're showing that the injury issues there are just persisting. This is a team that was 5-12 last year, 4-11 when Russell Wilson started. And they had a very close 11-10 win over San Francisco that, to me, just remains inexplicable. So I see Denver, and I say, all right, well, if Russ's numbers aren't, 16 and 13, if it's more, he's not going to double it, but like 29 touchdowns and 10 picks, I think would be a vast improvement for him. How many more wins does this team get? I don't think they beat Kansas City either time they play them. Maybe they get lucky in Denver because they actually have played Kansas City close. I take that back. I think the Chargers are going to be a significantly improved team. I think Denver slots in very comfortably to the 3rd spot in the AFC West. That's an 8-9 record, which would be their second best record since they won Super Bowl 50, 7-8 years ago. This is a perennial 5-7 win team since then. They went 9-7 the year afterward, fired Gary Kubiak. Oops. And then it's just been this dissension into like lower purgatory for my squad. 8 wins, I think, is where they land. I don't see them being in the wild card conversation beyond week 15 when they're all mathematically alive. So the hype beast, they would not be getting the attention they're getting in camp if we knew that was the result. So that's why I'm slaying the hype beast. I still think Denver is a year away.
Okay. Well, I mean, I feel not partially responsible, but I've obviously heaped a little bit of praise. Not heaped. I've sprinkled some praise on what I think could be a better picture for the Denver Broncos. But yeah, you do see as soon as, and I believe in Sean Payton, but you saw as soon as the Payton news arrived that the shackles and the hindrances of last season were cast off, and that it was only golden times ahead for a certain chunk. Yeah. A certain chunk.
Bereft of draft capital, gives up more of it for a head coach.
All right, for me, the hype beast that I'm looking to slay, the hype train that I just cannot get on board. And I'm not, we mentioned the homerism was starting to leak in just a little bit. We held it at bay for an hour. This isn't homerism as much. I love a lot of the players that this team gets to roll out there, but my concerns about the offensive foundation of the Washington Commanders, new era, new ownership, who knows, maybe a new name in the future. Who knows? Throw that on Twitter and see the type of interaction, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, and see what interaction you get there. But Terry McLaurin, fantastic talent. Love his gameplay. Complete wide receiver. Turf toe, not ideal. So that's just a little bit of a knock, especially early in the season. We'll see if he's able to get healthy soon and quick. Jahan Dotson, talk about someone that you've got a lot of love for, from the college tier to what he's shown in the pros. Someone very trendy on a breakout list. To have someone like Curtis Samuel as, an ancillary weapon on that offense. They have two running backs that, whether you've been in on Gibson in fantasy before and he's let you down, or you're all aboard Brian Robinson, and the just wild and frightening story of his season last year, then the one of the viral moments of the 2022 NFL season when he returns to that 50 Cent song, coming out to Many Men. I mean, there is talent galore. There's balance in the backfield. There's explosive talent at wide receiver. And they have promise in someone with Sam Howell that does have arm talent, no matter how he fell in the draft. But my concerns about offensive line, I think too many people were too quick to pronounce, Washington offense is back and firing after they ended the Baltimore Ravens' run of 24 straight preseason games with a win. Remember that they took a 3-point lead into halftime, the Washington Commanders, after playing their full allotment of starters against the Ravens backups. So let's just pump the brakes on that a bit. I think from a defensive standpoint, we know we spent much of our first 3 seasons of the NFL Brekkie Show talking about the talent on that Washington front line, defensive front. And then they add Emmanuel Forbes, draft crush, Quan Martin, super explosive playmaker, has made plays in preseason already, to the secondary to hopefully balance out that defense and make it a little more complete. But I just have such concerns with a young quarterback, no matter how good the talent is at the skill positions. Serious concerns still about that offensive line that I cannot get on board. This momentum that is building the Washington Commanders, and their big name receivers are going to return with just an immense top 6, top 8 type of offense. There's more to it than the big names that you fill in your fantasy sheets. There's a structure and a foundation and a core of an offense that starts with the line. And for me, they have not checked that box yet.
Yeah, Laz, they didn't add Jacoby Brissett to offer words of wisdom to Sam Howell in the quarterback room. If you're ranking starting QBs 1 to 32 in their situations, there's a cogent argument that Washington's is dead last. A couple other teams are in that conversation, but it's a quarterback-driven league. Behind that porous offensive line, doesn't matter how good the receivers are, and in the division that it's certainly in the top half of the NFL, probably for ranking divisions. I'm third, maybe. I mean, we can get into that, but there are no gimmies for Washington in the division.
No.
Dallas twice, Philly twice, New York twice.
They play the AFC East and their potential 4 top 10 defenses. They also have your Denver Broncos on the schedule, and they have the San Francisco 49ers on the schedule.
Yeah,
what are we doing there?
And that's honestly, it's analogous for me to New England's situation in the AFC East. You can make an argument for even, the Jets to make a run or Dolphins to make a run. You can make an argument for some of those teams to make a run. I can't find the lucid argument for Washington to find a way to win that division. And I think it's as nice of a kid as Sam Howell is, and as much as Ron Rivera says, I should have played him sooner. I mean, there's a reason that quote's getting out after some other quotes that accidentally snuck out of Washington's camp. Eric Bieniemy, it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, to get some traction. Washington will spring an upset here or there. They'll probably beat my Broncos. But this is going to be a team that's 6-11, and that's what they're going to be. So I'm with you that they win this. They have won the offseason Super Bowl since they got Santana Moss from the Jets, and it was just Albert Haynesworth. I lived in DC, man. They get some Pro Bowler in his twilight, and everybody would freak out. And then they would just barrel their way to 5-11. Well, now that we have 17 games, I'll say they're 6-11. But it's the same old Washington. 2 names later, soon to be a third name. So I do think they're going to rebrand yet again. Loyal fan base that has been tested, but it's time, man. I still think they're the also ran in the NFC East. So, Laz, I agree. And with that, we have doubled the estimated time of our show.
We have. And as our friend here, Ludwig, says hello from Puerto Rico, I think it's about time we say goodbye from Sydney and from Bristol, Connecticut. And do you want to, for the first time in the 2023 season, do you want to land this spaceship and get us on out of here?
Tell the people what's coming up. 2 days' time, Thursday morning, Sydney time. You've arranged a special guest.
I have. We will have a fantasy football special. We know that this week, and particularly this weekend, is a massive, massive weekend for fantasy football drafters. Hopefully you're doing it in person with good friends that you haven't seen or you haven't seen enough of over the off season. You get together, you have a few adult beverages or normal beverages. You have some chicken wings or non-chicken based, plant-based varieties, whatever it is that is your fancy. You sit back, enjoy some.
Don't wish that upon the people.
Make some terrible draft picks. And look, I've been titleless in my fantasy run in a couple of my main leagues for so far. One of the questions I will ask our special guest will be how to overcome, an 0-5 record in grand finals in one single league that's only been going for 9 years. But we will be joined by fantasy analyst and absolute superstar Liz Loza is going to join us a couple days' time, Thursday morning. Come on down, send through your questions now to me, to Phil, that you have fantasy related as we get you primed for a huge fantasy football draft weekend. I'm probably going to go give away some of my favorites. In saying that, as I mentioned, that has led me to precisely no fantasy titles in my 2 main leagues in a long time. These aren't 2-year leagues. These have been going for a while. So whether you want to listen to my fantasy analysis or not, that's up to you. But someone you will want to listen to is Liz, an absolute star. She's going to bequeath upon us immense amounts of fantasy knowledge, as well as some do's and don'ts for draft days, because you don't want to be the person there that, people are, we're putting a target on your back for how you conduct yourself on draft day. Anyway, that's for Thursday. Phil, I'll hand it back to you. Take us home.
Yeah, I'll see you guys in 2 days' time, or if you're watching this on delay, Wednesday, Arvo, U.S. time, Thursday morning, Sydney time. Wherever you're watching, Sydney, Bristol, anywhere in between, Puerto Rico. Thank you for joining us on this first of many editions of the Brekkie NFL show we have this season. Thank you for the contributors. Thank you for the sponsors that are upcoming. Year 4 is looking to be our biggest year yet. So thank you guys for continuing to build into this ridiculousness that Laz and I have created and curated. It's only so fun because you guys are such consistent contributors to it. So we will see you Thursday morning. Thanks for hanging out with us. See you soon.